But the tape wasn't the only item they recovered. The final twist edged closer. A series of photographs accompanied the footage, displaying faces they thought were familiar. Among them, a haunting image caught the eye of a detective. There stood Terry Hobbs, laughing, mingling with Joe and other notorious locals. The implications were devastating. Had Hobbs not just witnessed but participated in the horrors that unfolded? Could he have even orchestrated them? The enormity of the revelations left the detectives in turmoil. As they rushed to confront Hobbs again, a chilling realization set in. The truth was not just horrifying, it was entwined with betrayal, fear, and a community desperate to bury its darkest secrets. Picture a room filled with tension as investigators swarmed around the recovered footage. Each frame revealed unsettling images, almost mocking them. Hobbs, with his familiar grin, laughed amid shadows that seemed to echo the cries of those lost. Here was a man who'd buried his secrets deeper than the grave they had uncovered just days prior. But as they dissected the tape, one thing became painfully clear: they had only skimmed the surface of a tangled web of fear and complicity. This wasn't simply about Hobbs or Jer. The community itself had been a silent observer, participating in an unspoken pact, shielding those who should have been held accountable. Fueled with urgency, detectives organized a town hall meeting, bringing in any locals willing to finally share what they knew. The stakes had escalated. Whispers of a cover-up slithered through the crowd. Residents began to murmur among themselves, anxiety pulsing through them like electricity. As the meeting commenced, a frail woman stepped up to the podium. Her voice trembled but carried gravity. "I've lived in West Memphis my entire life. I've seen things," she began, her eyes darting nervously, "but I was too afraid to speak." Her admission sent chills through the room. Everyone leaned in closer, hearts racing. Those boys were seen the night they disappeared. And it wasn't just Joe and Terry. She paused for effect. Other men were with them, men who you'd never suspect. "This town has its secrets." Gasps erupted, and the murmurs turned into a cacophony of fear and disbelief. Who were these shadowy figures? JC, the woman, continued, describing a gathering that occurred shortly before the murders. A party held on the outskirts of town, where alcohol flowed and strange activities took place. The woman's story escalated to a crescendo, revealing one name that sent shockwaves through the audience: Johnny Taylor. He was a man shrouded in darkness, rumored to have ties to unspeakable rituals. With this bombshell dropped, detectives wasted no time in pursuing Johnny. He had long been a recluse, known for his erratic behavior and sinister reputation. As investigators tracked him down, they braced for an encounter that could break open the case wider than ever before. But it was what they found at Johnny's rundown trailer that sent heart rates skyrocketing. Inside, the walls were adorned with strange symbols, and a heavy silence hung in the air. A maze of ominous notes and photographs cluttered every surface, some depicting the boys, others portraying rituals that turned the stomachs of those who viewed them. Among the chaos, they discovered yet another shocking piece of evidence: a diary filled with cryptic entries and sketches of the boys, suggestively marked with dates leading directly to their deaths. What Johnny had chronicled couldn't be ignored. He had not just watched, he had played a role in the horrors that transpired. Just as they secured the diary, an unexpected twist pierced through the growing resolve of the detectives. Johnny burst through the back door, panic etched across his face. "You don't understand," he shouted. "They'll know you're coming." His desperate eyes darted around the room, suggesting more than just fear for himself. "There's a reason we kept things quiet," he continued, gasping for breath. "You don't know who you're dealing with." The tension was electric. "What do you mean?" the lead detective demanded. But Johnny clammed up, caught between terror and self-preservation. Instead, he whispered, "Find the others before it's too late." With that, he bolted from the room, leaving detectives in a state of confusion. They quickly realized this case was deeper than they'd imagined, entangled with a network that extended beyond West Memphis, perhaps even beyond the state itself. Racing against time, they pursued leads on other individuals mentioned in Johnny's diary. Each name felt like a ticking bomb, and soon they were pulling threads that revealed a disturbing tapestry of deception, fear, and complicity woven tightly within the fabric of the town. Then came another horrifying revelation. They received a tip-off about a secret society, hidden within the community, the kind of their activities in silence, operating under the cover of night. The detectives had unknowingly cracked open Pandora's box, and it was clear that this society was pulling strings, manipulating events and people to protect their identities. As new witness testimonies flooded in, they discovered that rituals had been performed to ensure a kind of power or control over the community. These sacrifices had become a grotesque form of tradition, and the boys were simply a part of this long-standing practice that no one had dared to question until now. Back in West Memphis, fear began to grip the community. Parents grew anxious, questioning who they could trust. Some even began pointing fingers at each other, refusing to acknowledge the darkness lurking in their neighbors' shadows. Then the detectives received an anonymous call that changed everything. Meet me tonight at the old train tracks. I have proof. Goose and Strand down their spines. Was this a trap, or would they finally uncover the full extent of this monstrous secret? The clock ticked as they assembled a small team and drove to the abandoned site under a blanket of darkness. The atmosphere was thick with dread. As they crept closer to the meeting point, the sound of footsteps echoed in the distance. Suddenly a figure emerged, but as the detectives drew closer, the chilling realization hit them. It was someone from the town, someone they never suspected, someone who had helped keep the truth hidden for far too long. As the figure stepped into the dim light, recognition washed over the detectives. None other than Sheriff Gary Hensley, a longtime pillar of the community. His presence sent shockwaves of disbelief coursing through them. How could he, of all people, be entangled in this macabre web? Listen, you don't understand, Hensley blurted out, eyes wide with anxiety. There are things you don't know. People you shouldn't mess with. Every instinct told the detectives to be wary. They needed answers, but Hensley seemed terrified, caught between loyalty to his community and a fear far deeper than they'd anticipated. I've been trying to protect everyone, he stammered, but it's too late now. They're watching. They always are. Who's watching? A detective pressed, heart pounding as tensions reached a boiling point. The sheriff sighed heavily, glancing around as if expecting shadows to spring to life. You think this is just about the boys? You think it's just one group of men? His voice trembled. No, it's much deeper. It's a whole system, people from other towns. And they've been terrorizing families for years. The boys were only the latest in a long line of sacrifices. What kind of twisted tradition was Hensley hinting at? Had the murders of Stevie, Christopher, and Michael been part of something far more horrific? The detectives pushed further, desperate for clarity. Tell us everything, demanded the lead investigator. This town deserves the truth. Hensley hesitated, glancing back over his shoulder. Meet me at the old church tonight. Bring no one. I'll reveal everything. With an uneasy alliance formed, the detectives regrouped, hearts racing. Trusting the sheriff was a gamble, but one that might pay off in uncovering the truth that lurked behind the town's veil of fear. As night fell, the atmosphere thickened with tension. The old church loomed ahead, its shadows stretching ominously as they approached. Silence enveloped them as they waited, every creak and rustle setting them on edge. Minutes felt like hours until the sheriff finally arrived, looking more anxious than ever. Panic radiated off him, and when he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I shouldn't have brought you here, he breathed, glancing around nervously. Stop stalling, Gary. What do you know? The urgency in the detective's voice cut through the panic. Hensley inhaled deeply. The boys, they weren't random victims. They were chosen as part of a twisted initiation into a cultist society that worships dark powers. Families in this town have been complicit for generations. They believed their futures depended on it. The weight of his words shattered the air around them. "You're saying entire families knew?" The detective asked, incredulous. "Not just the family's people in power. Community leaders. They've orchestrated these sacrifices to ward off bad luck. Or so they believe. One of them told me the boys were part of a rite that had to be completed." "A rite?" the detective echoed, voice heavy with dread. "And they've done this before?" Hensley nodded gravely. "Over 2 decades. People just disappeared, children swept away under the guise of accidents. But they were all connected." The detectives exchanged horrified glances, realizing the web of deceit extended beyond what any of them had imagined. Each piece of evidence now painted a chilling picture, one where trust was a weapon turned against innocent souls. "The last piece of this puzzle," Hensley continued, "is Dunham's Grove, an old hidden site where the rituals are held. I fear they're planning another ritual soon." Just then, a distant sound echoed through the Churchill growl of engines approaching. The detectives exchanged alarmed looks. Time was running out. "We need to go," one of them urged. But Hensley grabbed their arm. Eyes wide. "It's too late. They're here." Before they could react, a group of hooded individuals stormed through the doors, their presence casting an ominous shadow. The detectives pulled out their badges, but the cult members simply laughed, a haunting sound that chilled them to the bone. "You shouldn't have come here," one of the hooded figures taunted, stepping forward. "You're too late to save what you can't even see." With adrenaline surging, the detectives fanned out, desperate to confront the intruders. Chaos erupted as tensions broke into shouts and scuffles. "Stop! We can help you," Hensley shouted, desperately trying to protect the detectives from the impending storm. But before they could act, a flare of light erupted, illuminating the room briefly. In that split second, they saw the true faces of the figures, their eyes cold and devoid of humanity. "Your time is up," another figure growled, advancing towards Hensley, their hand gripping something metallic hidden beneath their robes. That's when a realization hit the detectives. Like a tidal wave, these weren't just cult members. They were powerful figures intertwined within the town's fabric. What was meant to be a confrontation turned into a battle for survival against a cabal they had underestimated. With the chaos swirling, a single thought burned clear in the detective's mind: not everyone would leave this encounter alive. This was more than just the fight for truth. It was a struggle against the very forces that had held West Memphis in fear for so long. As the dust settled and the fight began to escalate, the detectives had only one option left. They had to escape to unveil the truth that would shatter this destructive folly. The room erupted into chaos. Shadows clashed as the detectives struggled to contain the surging tide of masked figures. Hensley fought at their side, eyes wild with fear and determination. "We need to get to the evidence bag," he yelled over the clamor, pointing toward the front of the church where they'd hastily stashed the diary and video footage. With adrenaline coursing through their veins, they fought through the throng, desperately pushing toward the evidence. A hooded figure lunged at Hensley, grappling him to the ground as he shouted for help. The sound of flesh hitting wood echoed loudly. Hensley was caught. "Keep going. We can't let them take the evidence," shouted Detective Ramirez, grappling with another assailant, while the air grew thick with the pungent smell of sweat and fear. But just as the detectives were nearing the evidence bag, another wave of hooded figures surged in, blocking their path. Panic surged through the group. It was now or never. "Cover me," shouted Detective Wells as he plunged forward, determined to reach the evidence. The other detectives fought to keep the attackers at bay, fists flying amid the chaos. Wells reached the desk, heart pounding. He snagged the bag just as an assailant barreled into him. knocking him to the floor. Papers and photographs flew everywhere. But amidst the turmoil, Wells clung to a particular piece that had slipped from the bag of photograph of Johnny Taylor with a group of familiar faces, including several townsfolk and Hubs. A sense of dread washed over him. It wasn't a simple gathering, it was a meeting of people explicitly tied to the cult, revealing the intertwining of power players in West Memphis. What had they been scheming? In that moment of realization, the assailant lunged, but Wells sprang to his feet, clutching the photograph tightly. "I have to show them this," he thought, pushing his way back toward the others. "Get out of here. I'll hold them off," Hensley yelled, disarming one of the attackers and twisting away just in time. "No. We can't leave you," Ramirez cried. But the weight of desperation bore down on them. If they were to escape, they needed the evidence to expose the truth once and for all. With renewed determination, Wells shouted, "I have the evidence, let's go. We'll circle back for him." The detectives hastily retreated, fighting their way to the back exit. Hensley let out a wild, furious shout before he was overwhelmed by the mass of figures. "You must expose them, find the truth," he called out, his voice strained. As the detectives burst through the door, they sprinted into the cool night air, gasping for breath, illuminated only by the silver glow of moonlight. Adrenaline surged through their veins. But they couldn't stop their thoughts. Hensley, was he lost to them forever?